Hey everyone, Amarathy, and I'm back with another video for you guys. Today we have my recommendations on the best builds for each mastery that I can recommend for new players. Now, if you've joined me on twitch.tv/Amarathy, you'll know that I talk about the importance of starting off this game blind and making your own builds, as that's an important experience for enjoying this game. However, I know that that is not for everyone. So whether you're a new player looking for something a little bit more tried and trusted, or you just want to try a new mastery, these are my recommendations for you. Now, I've got all the information down below, so if you just want to skip to your timestamps and find the mastery that you're after, go right ahead. All the information is in the description. But before we get into that, I am going to preface with what I am looking for in these builds and why I've selected them. So the first thing I'm looking for is the build easy to learn and does it look good? Because there's no point recommending a build that's really difficult to play and you need your piano fingers going right from the get-go and it doesn't look all that impressive. It's a guide for new people, so I want you guys to have fun and look at builds that look awesome. The second is I'm looking for something that has a good gearing strategy. So you have a clear indication of what you're doing when you're starting off the build and trying to get it online with the key uniques. Then you go through that process of optimization, getting good rares and good exalteds, and then finally those really rare chase items such as legendaries and the likes. Lastly, I'm looking for builds that have active community members playing these builds and maintaining them such that you can talk to these people and get more information if you require. Alright, with all that said and done, let's get into them. Now, first up is my recommendation for the #1 build that I would recommend to new players. So if you do not care about what mastery you're playing and just want to jump into the game, this is the build that I would recommend to you, and that is the Earthquake Werebear, or EQ Werebear for short. It is a very strong build, it looks amazing, you jump around the battlefield, you're smashing things, you're doing gigantic damage and have a ton of health and defensives. This is such an easy build to get online, has some really rewarding gearing strategies, and you can talk to myself truly if you do want any more additional info. There are a heap of other guides out there as well on this specific build, so no stress in finding people who are playing this build if you do want to play it. Alright, next up is a build that I'm sure you're familiar with. It is the VK Auto Bomber, the Void Knight Auto Bomber, and I have Perry himself, his build, as my recommended version of this. I know that there are a few different types of this. His is the one that I recommend. I prefer his defensive gearing strategy over a few other ones that I've seen. This is a great build for just being able to clear monoliths. You've got really good screen clear. You can just numlock your Devouring Orb. We're going back to the Abyssal Echoes, which I always really like that functionality. It's super budget to get online and is a great starter build for people looking to get into the game and farming items. Probably one of the best league start builds as well. For the Paladin, we have the Flame Burst Warpath build. Now, this build is visually awesome. You're spinning around, you're doing Warpath, so you're always moving, getting the full benefit of your Wings of Argentus once you get those. You're doing a lot of spell damage, and Warpath is great for supporting that. And the majority of your AoE damage is going to be coming from Flame Burst. Now, we saw a nerf to this build in 084, however it's still really strong and my recommended build for the Paladin. Now, if you want to learn more about this build, go check out EPOCH builds. He's got a heap of guides up there. However, I would say that this is probably his favorite build that he likes to play himself, so you're always able to talk to him, and if you've got any further questions, go speak to him. For the Forge Guard, we have the Manifest Armor build. Now, this is great because Forge Guard is one of those masteries that has quite a few good builds that you can play with it. However, it's always typically been better to play those builds on either a Paladin or a Void Knight. So it's really cool to see the Manifest Armor coming up and being the best to be played on the Forge Guard. The reference guide for this is Crisis. I think he's got a really good guide on the forums. You can read through it and it shows just how strong the build can get with some really good gear. Go check that out. But one of the things that I really like about this build is that even though it is a pet build, you yourself are very tanky thanks to your shield throw. The Bladedancer is going to be the Poison Flurry build. Now, just for reference, even though I recommend you play this, please be aware that I fully anticipate this build to be nerfed in the future. However, it is just doing leaps and bounds more damage than anything out there at the moment. There's nothing that is even coming close to the damage of Poison Flurry. So when it does get nerfed, it's probably still going to be very, very, very strong. The one I am recommending is Arborist's Poison Flurry. He's been showcasing that on Druid's channel on EPOCH builds, so go check that one out if you can, but you can always just talk to Arborist on the LE Discord. He's pretty active there if you've got any further questions. For the Marksman, this was a bit of a toss-up. I have two builds that I'm going to recommend. The first one is my very own Decoy Bomber build. The reason why I'm selecting this one is because I think it's really awesome and flashy. It's got all the right stuff in it. It's super easy to gear for. And you can even start getting those legendaries as you level, because the Hell Reach, the Health and Blasting Agent, and Arrow Guard are all very low potential legendary items, meaning that they can be found super early on. The other one that I am going to recommend is the Bow Mage. You may be familiar with this. It's a great build. It looks flashy. It's got icicles spitting out everywhere. I'm going to recommend Lizard's Guide to check out what he's put forward. The only reason why I didn't select this one over the Decoy Bomber is that it can be a little bit of a trap for newer players when they first put your Morning Frosts on, and your dexterity absolutely plummets your physical resistance and your cold resistance. So it just takes a little bit longer to get online. So I think the Decoy Bomber is much more friendly, that you can just get it gearing and get it going straight away. Now onto the Acolytes, and starting off with, we have the Lich. Now when we think of community members playing Lich, I think there's only one person that comes to mind, and that is Mao's Crit Lich, because it is such a powerful build that he has been pushing in the arena since forever ago. You can check out the guide on his YouTube channel. It's a fantastic build. It blows up packs really quickly. It's well put together, really tanky. You've got the whole Reaper form with the second health bar, and Death Seal just blowing up the screen, heaps of leech and survivability, and it's got that awesome gearing progression and some new interesting items that can be incorporated into the build, such as the Prismatic Gaze. For the Necromancer, we have the Solo Abomination build. This is a really powerful build that has the single Abomination running around and destroying the screen, able to tank everything. Your job is really just to stay alive and keep your Abomination buffed. It's got very good clear for a Necromancer and keeps up pace. This build was put together by EPOCH Builds. However, I'm going to recommend you guys speak to the Codus, as he is the guy that plays this build non-stop and can answer a lot of your questions as well. For the Sorcerer, I'm going to recommend the tried and trusted Nova Boy Foes build that he's been playing since as long as I can remember. This build is able to clear really high in monoliths. He's pushed over 1,000 corruption and is consistently one of the top, if not the top, arena player. So it's got a lot of EHP in the build, which is missing from a lot of Sorcerer builds, and can still keep up with the damage with insane bossing thanks to the Lightning Blast convergence. The introduction of legendaries also gives some awesome chase items, with the Ashen Crown, the Prism Wraps, and Orion's Eyes all being very rare and high LPL items, giving you plenty of time to perfect this build and push it to absolute extremes. For the Spellblade, I'm going to recommend two builds as well, and oddly enough, it's going to be me and Lizard coming through. However, I'm going to start with Lizard's version of this, which is the Flame Reave Spellblade, a very common build using Firebrand to stack up Illuminating Fire and Blade Weaving, and then dumping it with very powerful Flame Reaves. There is a dozen versions of this build out there. It's probably one of the most common builds that I see across the game. However, I really like Lizard's version, because even though he doesn't play this much, I think he's got it right in how to gear this character, which is get it defensively as powerful as possible, since the damage comes really easily. It's just a matter of surviving and having the right mobility, so the inclusion of a Bastion and Quicksilver is what I would recommend for this build. An honorable mention to my own Frostbite Shatterblade build, so you can check that out there. I think that has a lot higher potential for the Spellblade once you can get all the uniques. However, it's not the build that I would recommend to new players starting out the game, as you do need to get those uniques online before the build really starts to make sense. The Beastmaster is going to be using the Squirrel build. So you'll start by leveling this build as a typical wolf build, and there's plenty of guides on this, one linked below. And when you can get the Helm of the Scurry, this build absolutely takes off. And we've seen some footage of this being taken into tier 4 Jura and killing her under 10 seconds with some nutty attack speed. I've got footage from McMagic's versions that he's showcased on EPOCH builds. However, I would also seek out Sir Free For All, as I know he's been showcasing the build with some very powerful gear. Those are the two people I would recommend talking to when looking at this build. Lastly is the Shaman, and I did leave the Shaman for last intentionally, as it is not a mastery that I would recommend to new players. Unfortunately, the Shaman specific mastery passives are not that great, Avalanche isn't that great, so really any build done by the Shaman can be done better by the Beastmaster or the Druid. However, if you are playing a Shaman and want to know the most powerful build for the Shaman, the one that I'm going to recommend is still the Spriggan form Shaman. Last patch, this was actually the better version of Shaman, because you had mana issues staying in form. However, it's so easy to stay in Spriggan form now that it's better to play this version with the Druid with the updated passive trees. There are a few other builds that can work, but none that I would really recommend as a strong contender. So if you haven't made up your mind on what to play, I would say just avoid Shaman and everything else is great. However, if you are a bit of a masochist, I would recommend talking to Flintler and sharing your pain and experiences with him, as he is our resident Shaman guru. Well, that about wraps it up. As I said before, all the information can be found in the description below. My final piece of advice is, if you are a new player, join the Last Epoch Discord and join us in the Twitch community. We are always happy to help new players with builds and build ideas and why certain things are better than other things, and have those discussions. So link to my Twitch there, but feel free to swing by anyone's Twitch, as we've got a great community that's always willing to help out new players. Until next time.